Hello, fellow crafters. This is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yeepy for Yana video. Today I have a card and a matching envelope to share. Both were created using a few of my favorite techniques: pattern stamping, Copic coloring, and hot foiling. I first made a card with a floral pattern, and it occurred to me it would be really great to make a coordinating envelope to put the card in and really wow the recipient. I started by stamping a floral pattern onto 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock panel using a stunning peony image from the Best Friend Ever stamp set. Now, first I planned to use masking paper and mask the images to create a continuous floral pattern, and I actually did do that. You can see the pattern here. I stamped the pattern somewhat randomly, and truth be told, I didn't like it. It just felt odd. So I re-stamped the pattern, but without any image overlap, and thus skipping the use of masking paper. That was a lot easier and a lot faster, as I didn't have to mask the images. And it was just overall a lot simpler. I used Memento Tuxedo Black ink for stamping images, and also my Misty stamping tool to make it easier for myself. Now, I didn't film the stamping portion of this video as it is basic, and I do show the stamping in nearly every video that I do. Instead, I thought I would focus on the other important parts of this card making process. I used my Copic markers to color the images, and I colored the peonies in the same way for both my card and my envelope liner. Now, to create the liner for the envelope, I used a piece of white cardstock. It was cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. It's just one of those pre-cut panels that I use for my card bases or my card fronts. I placed that panel inside the envelope and used a pencil to roughly mark where I needed to cut it. No signs here, no measuring, I just eyeballed everything. Next, I used my paper trimmer and simply cut the panel to an approximate size. It worked beautifully in the end, so don't be afraid to do that. Just eyeball the placement, eyeball the measurements, and trim liner to size. Next, I used my Copic markers and colored this image using mostly green, pinks, a little bit of yellow, and then a lot of deep dark blue for the background. I used G99 as my darkest green. I really love this color. Next, I came in with G94, my medium green, and then I added YG03, the lightest green. It's a very nice, warm yellow sort of green color, and I love how that particular color adds a lot of sunshine, I would say, a lot of warmth to the leaves. I wasn't doing anything special in terms of coloring. I just did basic 3-color blends going from dark to medium to light. In some cases, I did go back to intensify the shadows or intensify the highlights, but for the most part, my coloring was rather simple. Now, to color the peonies, I did use a couple more markers, a few additional markers. I think I ended up using 5 different colors, and I started with the R39, which is a really nice deep red. And I used that color to mark the shadows. I really wanted to create some dark shadows on this flower to have a lot of contrast to the finished image. Now, I used the outlines of the petals to place the shadow areas. Now, my next color is RV19. And while these two colors don't particularly blend well together, I enjoyed combining them for this image as they did give me that very nice, vibrant, hot pink color for my peonies. Next, I came in with the R83 color, which is a very nice, soft, medium pink. I used that to blend the two previously dark pink and red colors. And then I used RV10 and finally RV00 colors to color the petals even further and create that highlight on each of the petals. I also used the RV00 marker to blend all of the colors together on my petals and make sure I didn't have any harsh lines in between the different marker colors. As for the flower centers, I used Y35, Y15, and also Y13 markers to make the flower centers yellow. I really like the combination of pink and yellow. It is so classy and it always works. Now, something that I love to do is I love to color my backgrounds dark. I love a white background, a light background, but I also love to see my images pop off a dark background. So for this card, I used B39 marker, which is a really nice deep dark blue. And I used that marker to color the entire background for my card and also for my envelope liner. Now, this is a little bit time consuming because you do have all of that space, but it's not hard to do because you're not blending anything. You're just applying color. Now, this also takes quite a bit of marker, so make sure if you do this that you have a refill available so you can easily refill your marker as you go. And I actually ordered a bunch of refills for my darker marker colors just because I go through them so fast when I make backgrounds like these. So here's a look at the finished background, the finished envelope liner. You can see I didn't color it all the way to the end. I did use a pencil and sort of marked where the liner becomes invisible in my envelope, and I figured I didn't need to color the part that was tucked in the envelope because nobody was going to see it. So I colored it like that. Now I also added some foiling to the envelope using one of the Spellbinder's new Glimmer Hot Foil sentiment plates. And I love the way this looks. The sentiment says, "Made with love." And I'll go back to the foiling part in a minute, so I'll show you that in detail. Now the envelope, of course, has a fold. The flap folds, and that's how you close the envelope. The liner that we just created doesn't have a fold, so we need to add a score line to that so that we are able to open and close our envelope. It was a little bit tricky for me to do. I didn't want to eyeball this. I wanted to make sure that I had perfect placement for the score line for that envelope. So the way I did it is I first used double-sided tape. I added that just to the V portion of my liner, and then I used that to adhere the liner onto the envelope. So the liner is only attached at the top where that V is. Now the bottom is not attached because I wanted to be able to move freely. And that's, I think, the trick with adding the envelope liners. You just want to make sure they are adhered at that V section of the envelope. Now, having that in place, I pulled out my scoring board. I aligned my envelope on the scoring board, making sure that I had the groove of the scoring board aligned with the previously created score line on the envelope. And then I used my scoring tool to add an additional score line onto that liner piece that I just adhered. Not too difficult. It's actually quite easy to do. You just need to make sure that you align things and just go ahead and create a simple crease and go ahead and reinforce that fold with your fingers. Now, whenever I have a colored pattern like this one, I often like to add something to it to make it pop. In this case, I wanted to use one of the new glimmer plates from Spellbinders from their Duo Glimmer Essentials collection. And here I have a set of rectangles. My idea is to use the largest rectangle frame to add a foiled frame onto this background. I think that's going to look really beautiful. Now, a friend of mine recently asked, how am I not afraid to foil on a background like this after I've done all of that work coloring the background? Because if you've tried hot foiling, you know that it's not always perfect. Sometimes you might have underfoiling or overfoiling, so it can be scary to foil on something like this, on a colored piece like this, because you can easily ruin it. So the way I do it, I make sure I have another piece of paper of the same kind of paper that I just colored on, and I go ahead and I test foil on that first. Now that allows me to test both the paper that I'm using and also test the plate that I'm using to make sure that both work well and that I'm able to foil nicely on that actual colored background. So here I have my Glimmer Hot Foil system set up. I've pressed the timer button to heat up the plate. I'm now using my quick trimmer to trim the foil to size, and I'm actually eyeballing it. I'm not really measuring things. And I'm just going to quickly do a test run to see if this is going to foil well on that same piece of paper, the same type of paper that I just colored on. And this is Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Now, spoiler alert, it did foil well. I had a little bit of overfoiling, but overfoiling is nothing to be concerned about. It can be easily removed, so I wasn't worried about that. That gave me green light to go ahead and foil this dual line glimmer rectangle on my colored piece. Now this time I was a little bit more careful. I did cut my foil nearly exactly to size, and having done that, I used my hinge method to attach the dual line glimmer plate onto my background. Now the hinge method allows you to make sure you attach the plate exactly where you want it. For instance, I want to make sure that this frame is foiled exactly in the center of my background. So I'm using a piece of low-tech tape. This is Spellbinder's best ever craft tape. It's actually fantastic for things like that. So I'm using that tape to attach my glimmer plate onto the background. I'm creating a hinge. Then once I have that in place, I can easily slide my foil under the plate, use another piece of tape to secure both the plate and the foil in place, and then foil safely knowing that it's going to foil exactly in the center. And it did. So I followed the Glimmer Hot Foil machine instructions, and let's take a look at the background and the result. Look at that. It turned out so nice. I love that double gold frame around my panel. It looks very beautiful. Now, I do have a little bit of overfoiling, just like I did the first time, but that is easily removable with a dry, stiff paintbrush. So I'm just using one of my paintbrushes. I actually have this paintbrush dedicated just for that, for removing overfoiling. And look at that. Looks perfect. Okay, another set that I'm using today to finish this card is a set of sentiments, also from Spellbinders. Now, this is called the Mini Everyday Sentiments Glimmer Hot Foil Plate and Die Set. And you have a lot of sentiments in here. You have celebrate, thank you, I adore you, P.S. I love you. From all of us, happy birthday, you've got this, made with love, so proud of you, thanks a million, feel better soon, congratulations, I'm here for you. And that's just a half of the sentiments. Now, these are the mini sentiments. Here I have another set of the Spellbinder's regular sentiments, and you can see how these compare in size. So the mini sentiments are indeed smaller than these regular sentiments. I went ahead and I foiled You Are My Everything on another piece of white cardstock, and here I used that same foil that I used previously. Oh, I think I forgot to mention the color of the foil. The foil I'm using today is copper. It looks very much like gold, but it has a little bit of a different tint to it. I quite like it on this dark background. One of the things that I struggle with is that I'm never sure if I should keep my background as is, meaning covering the entire front of an A2 card, or if I should trim it and have a bit of a white border show on the finished card. I did debate it a little bit for this project, but I ended up trimming it to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches so that I have that nice white border on my finished card. I foam mounted the panel onto the card base. I used foam adhesive tape. I also foam mounted the sentiment, and now I'm just going to add a couple of clear droplets onto this card just to emphasize a few sections here and there. Now, if you don't have a Glimmer hot foil system or a similar hot foil system, you can use a die to cut your panel out. There are many dies that add beautiful stitched or faux stitched edge to a panel, so you can easily do that to embellish your card. And instead of a foiled sentiment, you can possibly heat emboss something or use one of the Simon's pre-printed sentiments. There's lots of options for you to try. And here's a look at the card together with the envelope. I love how well these two go together and how the envelope complements the card. I think the recipient is going to love it. And all of that foiling, it just shines so beautifully on the dark background and also on the envelope. Such a special touch. So that's it for me for today. I hope you found this video useful. If you make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thank you so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.